Hey, I'm Keegan, and welcome to Car Combine. Our website is currently under development. We'll have more news regarding it in the future. In the meantime, let's check out this 2020 McLaren 720s Spider. Now, McLaren is a relatively fresh name within the automotive industry. Though the company has been around for years, having made their mark in the F1 racing back in the 60s, only in the last decade has a manufacturer become a household name. Now, back in 2009, when McLaren released the MP412C, they only had one other production car from the 90s, the famous McLaren F1, which are now fetching for well over $20 million. With the success of the MP412C, McLaren has produced some amazing performance vehicles, and their name sits alongside the likes of Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Porsche. Today we're taking a look at the 2020 720s Spider, which I think is one of the best demonstrations of how McLaren built up their name within the performance automotive industry so quickly. So let's talk numbers. This uses McLaren's 4-liter twin-turbo V8 engine, just like most of the McLaren models. Pushing out over 710 horsepower and 770 newton-meters of torque, this car will launch you to 100 kilometers an hour in 2.8 seconds and has a top speed of over 340 kilometers an hour. Though McLaren is known to underrate their cars, so their true performance figures might be more than that. Now, this car only weighs about 1,300 kilograms, which, combined with the lightweight and the high performance figures, this car is monumentally fast. The 720s Spider starts at around $380,000 Canadian, but that price can quickly rise with McLaren Special Operations. McLaren Special Operation is McLaren's personalization division. If your pockets are deep enough, customers are able to completely personalize their vehicle with custom paints, interior touches, and has even gone as far as developing few-off cars for clients like the Sabre. One of the options this car has is the McLaren Sport exhaust, so it's tuned differently than the 720s Coupe. Take a listen to how this V8 sounds. So, moving on to the exterior, this car is finished in MSO Supernova Silver, which is a $12,000 Canadian option. Supernova Silver is not just any silver, it has deep paint flakes making the car pop in the sun. The depth of the paint really makes it stand out from a standard silver. Now, McLarens, generally speaking, have some of the most beautiful and distinctive cars on the road, which is surprising because their design language follows function over form. The 720s went for a shark-like design and put heavy consideration on aerodynamics to make the car slippery, yet have enough downforce to outperform most vehicles around the track. Every time you look at the car, there seems to be a new curve or intake you hadn't seen before. Now, one of the coolest exterior features on the McLaren 720s is the hidden door intake. So, most manufacturers have a door intake on the outside of the car, but McLaren decided to hide it. The car channels air through the door and up to the engine. You see the lines follow through from the front of the car to direct air into the engine. Now, upon the initial release of the 720s, a very controversial feature of them was the headlights. The 720s has massive holes in the front with only small headlights. This open design allows the car to carry air from the engine and drivetrain to cool them down when driving. Though again, it was initially controversial, this design demonstrates McLaren's focus on function over form. Now, moving on to the interior of the McLaren 720s, let's start with the doors. Yep, that's right, this one has billionaire doors. Now, when the driver door of the McLaren 720s is actually open, you can see two buttons here labeled tonneau. Now, when the roof is up, McLaren allows you to lift the tonneau cover for extra storage space, where the roof goes when the top is down. Being performance cars generally don't have much storage space, it's a pretty useful feature for owners who want to take their car on road trips. Now let's talk about the roof of the 720s. This car actually is a hardtop convertible, which I'm thankful for. It gives it that coupe-like design, which I'm a huge fan of. Now, it only takes 11 seconds to put up and retract the roof. Now that's quick. So, taking a look at the interior of the 720s, you'll notice the interior is rather bare. Being this is a performance-focused vehicle, they didn't want to add unnecessary features which add weight to the car. Though there isn't too much going on in here, it still has great styling and looks sporty just as you would expect from a car like this. Now, one of the coolest features on the 720s is the gauge cluster. Right now it's down, but if you press this button, it pops out. When you turn the car on, the screen slides up and shows you all of your information. You can also put it down manually again by pressing that little button to the left of the steering wheel. When you put the car in track mode by pressing the active button and turning both dials to track, the screen slides back down and only shows your RPMs, gear, and speed, removing all distractions from the driver when you're on the track. Now, the infotainment system on the McLaren 720s is super easy to use. The touchscreen is super responsive and it's not filled with a bunch of nonsense. Such an intuitive infotainment system is rare to find on supercars, but it's cool that McLaren put that much thought into making it easy for the customers. So now that we've had a brief overview of the McLaren 720S Spider, let's take it for a drive. All right, so we are now 2 teenagers behind the wheel of the McLaren 720S Spider. You know, thank you to the owner for actually trusting us. But okay, so first thing, having driven the coupe before I drove the Spider, there's a big exhaust difference. So this one is actually tuned a bit different, especially with a sport exhaust, and it's actually a bit louder, and it pumps oxygen with like a inside air pump, I guess, is how I guess to describe it. But yeah, so it actually pumps sound into the cabin for the you know, little extra sound, because you know, McLarens aren't necessarily known for their sound. This thing drives like an animal. We drove it to the location and we didn't even like take it out of comfort mode, and it's just an animal. Whenever you put the foot down, it's just there. The power is there, and oh man,
it's amount of turbo lag that's fun. It's not kind of a burden to have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there is. You definitely notice a bit of turbo lag, but yeah, it just makes it a bit more exciting, because when those turbos kick in, you're just off like a rocket. Man, I've driven other cars like the Performante, the 488, other supercars. Nothing compares to the speed. Even you've been inside a bunch of them, and nothing compares to a McLaren. It's unbelievable. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, they're kind of like a technology company that are producing cars in a way, but man, this thing is just an absolute monster.
More of a Formula One team that produces supercars.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what you want.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows in this car. 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. It's got 710 horsepower, weighs 1,300 kilograms. Like, this thing, it's an absolute monster. I love driving this thing. Even when you're just cruising around, it just feels so cool. But so one thing I learned was that the suspension on the Spider is actually softer than the coupe, because this is more of like a not driver's car per se, but like a more comfort oriented car, because it's got the convertible. You're not really buyers for this car aren't really like necessarily going for like a track experience. This is more just like a fun everyday car. So the suspension is a bit softer than the 720S coupe. Another thing too, this car is not intimidating to drive whatsoever, which kind of sounds counterintuitive, but like, I can hop in this car, drive it, I feel comfortable. Like, we're in comfort right now, just cruising along, and it feels like a normal car to drive. It's actually super nice. The suspension, again, it's really comfortable cruising around. So if you put the car into track mode, you press the active button, you push the 2 dials over, you'll see the screen of the gauge cluster goes down. So this takes away any distractions from when you're driving around a track, so it only shows your gear, your RPMs, and your speed, which is pretty cool. So you might notice in the back, there's 2 flying buttresses that are actually made out of glass. So the coupe, they're actually body panels, but on here they're glass, which this kind of adds to the comfort and like easiness of driving the car, because I can see right at the back, there's good visibility, it's comfortable, it's smooth. I'm a big fan of this car. I feel like it'd actually be a relatively good daily driver. Another thing too, like with the Spider compared to the coupe, is that with the Spider, you lose virtually nothing. It's still the hardtop convertible. You only gain about 40 kilograms. Performance figures are the exact same, but you get a convertible experience, which is kind of cool, because you know, you still have the performance of the coupe version, while you can, on a Sunday cruise, just put the top down. It's actually, I take the Spider over the coupe. I bet that this is a better buy over the coupe. Looking at the interior, the interior isn't anything special, but it's kind of what you'd expect from a performance car. They're not trying to add a bunch of additional comfort features that make the car heavier. They want to make the car as light as possible. And regardless of that though, it's still like a really cool looking interior, even with the screen that you can pop down manually. You got the center, the infotainment system, which is actually super intuitive. You got the Bowers & Wilkins sound system. We were playing some music earlier, and it sounds unbelievable. I mean, it's a $5,000 stereo system. But one feature this specific car doesn't have is the electrochromatic roof. So a lot of the 720S Spiders have a glass panel instead of just like the normal panel up there. So there's a button. They know that with glass, the interior would heat up super quick with the sun beating down. So there's actually a little button up there that there's electric shaders within the glass. So it's super cool that McLaren actually thought of that for the customers, which shows their attention to detail as a company. All right, so now we are getting on to the 401. Now, the handling in this car is beyond anything. Like, the steering itself, super direct. You point the steering wheel and it goes. And I mean, this car, it's a McLaren. It's got 700 horsepower.
Think we need to do a poll?
picks up like unbelievably quick. I love driving these things just because there's like, I mean, obviously I can't give it. It's not my car at the end of the day. I'm not trying to put it into a wall or anything, but I mean, from what we get to experience, even just driving it lightly, it's such an unbelievable car, and I just, I really can't believe that McLaren came up within the last decade and is producing this amazing of vehicles.
And it only improved with the 765 LT.
Yeah, exactly. Their new track performance version of the 720S, the 765 LT, will do 0 to 60 in like what, 2.3, I think.
Yeah.
It's McLaren just keeps stepping it up every car they make, and they put out a new car like every year, and every time it sets a new bar. And they really are like iPhone in the way they operate as a company, because they put a new car out constantly, and it just keeps getting better and better and better.
And the innovation too, introducing with the Artura, the new V6 hybrid.
Yeah. And then they even have the hybrid of the new Speedtail. They had it in the P1.
Yeah.
Like, McLaren technology-wise are above any other car company.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they know what they're doing.